Hey, this is Sydney, and I am here to talk us through the Astro weather of October 29th to November 4th, 2025. I don't know about you, but this grand water trine is kind of kicking my ass right now, and I was so curious about it. And I realized that because there's kind of like mixed reception between the planets, that it's really, really giving a lot of like, I'm really full, but you keep feeding me. You're like giving me too much, too many feelings. Anyways, I hope that it's working out a little bit better for you. As I record this on October 28th at 9:45 a.m., we are about to get a huge kite in the sky with the moon at the apex with that grand water trine. So that Capricorn moon's going to get us going, going, going. Yeah, there's a lot going on this week. But before we get started, I just want to invite you to please like and subscribe to my videos. I'm always trying to find my audience and I'm always trying to find new clients. And I mostly record these things because I think that it keeps me engaging with the astrology and talking about it instead of just kind of living up in my head. And it allows me to incorporate, new techniques that I'm learning as I continue to go through school. I am a eternal and avid learner of astrology, and I doubt that I will ever be done. So, I wanted to briefly go over some of the keynotes. I have notes here and kind of everywhere. So if you see my eyes going around, it's literally because I'm looking at everything everywhere all at once. But we have that grand water trine like I was talking about. And once the moon leaves Capricorn, as I'm recording this, at its very last degrees. So when I'm talking about the week that we're going into, October 29th to November 4th, we need to know that for most, or at least the beginning part of that week, there's really no earth in the sky. So we're back to the heady, emotional, not really tethered in reality, ungrounded sort of vibe that's been kind of kicking it. So if you felt like for the last maybe 2 days you could kind of put your feet on the ground, that makes sense because the moon was in Capricorn, but we're about to leave that space again. Pluto is still out of bounds. The moon is back in bounds. We've been dealing with some out of bounds moons for a minute. Mars and Uranus are contra parallel all week, which is an interesting kind of like hidden aspect, which I think is going to continue to incite and encourage the heavens or encourage people to continue to be kind of shocking and surprising in erratic sort of ways, ways that we are like, whoa, that kind of came out of nowhere. Yeah, so surprising things that just don't really make sense, which I think is this whole reality that we're living in right now. It's super fun, don't you think? We have some big aspects through the week, including Mercury opposite Uranus, Mercury sextile Pluto. We have Venus opposite Chiron, Venus square Jupiter, Venus quincunx Saturn, Mars trine Neptune, Mars going into Sag, including that ingress for Mercury into Sag, and Mars opposite Uranus. So those are kind of the biggies that are going to be happening for this week. So feel free to also use the timestamps since you're seeing me talk now. You can go into the various days if you want to get your hands on just a particular day in general. Yeah, I think that kind of covers some of the things that we are going to be talking about. The Jupiter Saturn trine, it's so close to perfect and it has not quite perfected yet, right? It's still within this like 1 and 2 degrees. It will not perfect until August 31st of 2026. So it just kind of goes in and out of this space of like this flow, this too much, There's something about expanding protections, expanding borders and limitations. There's this expansion and contraction thing that's kind of working right now in the water signs, and certainly has to do, I definitely think this has to do with laws and immigration. When it does perfect its trine, it is going to be in the fire signs, which will be very interesting. It'll be Saturn in Aries and Jupiter in Leo, which definitely has a more, I'm going to say passionate, inspired sort of thing. Aries is the sign of me first, and Leo is the sign of children and creativity and play. So it'll be interesting to see how this perfected trine really is going to come to fruition in all of our lives. But again, that's not until August of 2026. What is still working, moving and grooving is that Neptune, Saturn, they're retrograde right now, almost conjunction. Right now, they are now 4 degrees apart. So they're not quite talking to each other as much, though Neptune is at that anaretic 29th degree. And as I speak right now, we are having some crazy water activity with those storms near Jamaica. So I hope that everybody stays really, really safe and that everybody comes out okay in the end around that. But I do think it's of note to mention that Neptune is anaretic. And if you can hear my dog losing his mind over a bone, I apologize about that. He just really likes his lobster. And we have Uranus is also anaretic at that 0 degrees Gemini. We're having all of these little explosions of tech, these surprising new to us discoveries around communication, information. It's, still working within that trine to Pluto, lots of different pieces of information and secrets are coming out. I think there's a lot of things having to do with the plans that those in power have had around us and over us, right? Or have been making for us that are more and more coming to fruition and also to light, that is kind of causing us to go, actually, this is too much. This is just too much and we need something to stop here. Pluto's still out of bounds. So I have a lot of hope that amongst all of the secrets and pieces of information and data that we are being made privy to, that more and more people are starting to understand that we are stronger together. We are stronger in community. We are stronger in mutual aid. That the government really isn't coming here to save us. And it has definitely been bought by tech moguls, the super nerds that got too rich. I hope that doesn't get me in trouble with YouTube, but here we are. Okay, so let's get into the week, day by day. If you prefer these things to be in kind of shorter doses, remember I am on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I also post on Facebook, so those are all the day by days. So just as a reminder, that is available in other spaces as well. All right, so we find ourselves on Wednesday, October 29th, 2025. It's Wednesday. It is Mercury's day. And boom, right at the top of the morning, 4:02 a.m., Mercury enters the sign of Sagittarius. Now, this is the sign of its detriment, right? This is definitely a space where Mercury loses some quote unquote dignity, where it's like strong and it feels empowered in, right? It's being fueled by an exalted planet, though. Its ruler is that Jupiter in Cancer, but it can't really see it. This is a space where it's like can't really witness it. So there's a kind of an unmoored wildness that happens, I think, when Mercury enters Sag, we enter a space where speech gets a little bit, like the ideas get broader. We get far more like philosophical, kind of out in the weeds. We're not so precise and detail oriented and curated, right? Like we just left a place where it was very intense and very kind of, let's say, dark and super passionate and really emotional as well. It was in a water sign, but now we have Mercury in a fire sign, which is just shooting from the hip, which a Sag loves to do. It wants to adventure. It's almost like playing games with the different thoughts. It's not so serious, right? It's philosophical, but not so serious. So it will be interesting to see kind of how we all communicate, kind of shifts the temperament of everything around us, right? There can be a self-righteousness here. And also like our thoughts and process and how we're speaking, it can kind of turn to things that have to do with truth and have to do with our own truth, our subjective truth, and also have to do with things around like law, legalities of things to a certain extent. But really think about the idea of like, what's my truth here? And we're going to get an opportunity to kind of maybe stand on some business there. So 4:02 a.m., Mercury goes into Sag. Just prior to that, though, we did have a very dreamy, intuitive, kind of spiritual trine of Mercury to Neptune, really kind of inviting us to like get into our dream state and like kind of swim around in that space. And it's in the middle of the night. So I imagine that we might have had some very like visually intriguing dreams, which I like as well. At 9:20 a.m., we get the moon square sun. That is the first quarter square. So this is a crisis point. This is like, okay, like I need to take some sort of action to get, towards my goals, getting these things done for this cycle. We do have, the moon is in detached, more humanitarian, more... Oh, I should point over here. Sorry. Here's the moon. My bad. It's far more social. It's, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few kind of moment here with Aquarius, and so where the sun in Scorpio is very much about like security and protection and emotional protection and investigation. There's like this passionate, mysterious kind of deep thing. Like now with this square, we got this fixed air, which is really kind of like, I don't know. I think that Aquarius energy is a little cuckoo, like strange, like eccentric, like enigmatic. And I really love that for them. They're the rebels, right? So this square really kind of gives us this pressure, this crisis of awareness and how we want to kind of maybe break free and to liberate ourselves in order to get some stuff done. We're going to have Mars trine Saturn at 12:05 p.m. Now here's Mars, here's Saturn retrograde in Pisces. Now this trine here is such a good working trine. It is very, let's get stuff done. Let's diligently go after our goals and aspirations in order to move forward. It is very like a sustained, like almost at the top of our speed. It's almost if Mars is almost at the top of its speed and Saturn has a little bit of its foot on the brake. And they're just kind of in this flow state. I'm not sure if you've ever been on the highway where you've had to like sustain like 72 miles per hour, and it takes this like balancing act. There's this flow, there's this ability. So it's like, really working forward on our goals and what the things that we're passionate about. We have Jupiter in play, of course. There's a lot of emotions involved here, a lot of feeling, a lot of intuition sort of stuff. And there's also just this idea of too much. We still have this aspect that is, it's still within that 1 degree with Jupiter, just kind of like force feeding, like, here, more. So just kind of keep an eye on how you use your energy and how you expend it. Then we get at 12:35 p.m. Mercury opposite Uranus, because Mercury has just gone into Sag. Now it has this opposition with Uranus, which, Gemini, Sagittarius, right brain, left brain. This is data versus bigger, larger truths and philosophies, right? There's information, whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't really matter. That Gemini thing, right? It can be gossip, it can just be information. It's just what it is, these little pieces. Whereas like the Sagittarian principle is this larger, broader, connected to the universe or to your sort of God sort of truth. Mercury opposite Uranus can really bring some sudden insights, some sudden information kind of, coming up, having to do with this right brain, left brain. There could be stuff that kind of comes up about the brain or about how we're operating in truth or not truth. Certainly, we know that we're dealing with so much having to do with like what is real and what is not on the internet right now. If you're ever curious, look up the dead internet theory. It's very, very clear from being on various sites that in a lot of ways, we're just interacting with bots, which is crazy, right? So I think that there's something here about that. But just know that there are going to be sudden words, sudden insights, and that sort of thing. And with that trine from Mars to Saturn, trying to kind of get stuff diligently done, I think that this feels like a pretty interesting day. I would say a very interesting day because we do have these, it's the first quarter moon. We have the opposition with Mercury and Uranus. We have the trine of Mars and Saturn. This is the sort of day where I think we can get some stuff done. But also we could be getting some pretty wild disruptive news, especially because Mercury will now be on a world point, hitting that opposition to Uranus and Gemini at a world point. It'll be interesting to see if it has to do with something that maybe we had some sort of information about before, but now there's like a real big awareness. Like it was kind of whispered in the background, but now with Uranus being retrograde, it kind of goes back over that point. So yeah, big day. There's not a lot of other aspects. There's just some minor aspects that kind of allow us to maybe get into a calmer space, emotionally and mentally, or maybe a more imaginative space. With that moon quintile Mercury, I think it just kind of gives us, it feels like forward vision, forward thinking. And like looking out on the horizon, being like, this is how I want to go forward. So I think that that's pretty great, especially after all of the big stuff of the day. Okay, so let's move forward into October 30th, Thursday, Jupiter's day. Here's Jupiter here, Jupiter in Cancer. He's just loving to just boost up people, just amplify, just kind of hyphy, and in fact, we still have this grand water trine working its way through. We do not have any planets in Earth, so everything feels real heady, real hearty, right? Like real emotional, real thinky, but like we can't really quite place it. That's what I think it feels like when we're not having any Earth in the chart. It's like we can't ground ourselves into reality. There's lots of ideas and thoughts kind of floating around here and feelings, but like, how do we make something of it? We don't get to right now because we don't have that Earth. Okay. Jupiter days are really good for travel. They're really good for kind of sitting in philosophical thought, engaging in like higher, broader visions, stuff around goals as well. Try to kind of expand your mind, man, that kind of idea. So October 30th, Thursday, Moon trine Venus, 12:34 a.m. This is a really lovely trine. It's a very social trine. So this trine, though, is just really pleasant, and it feels like, wanting to engage with other people and have a nice exchange of conversation and ideas and engaging in like, things that you think are beautiful kind of aesthetically, but maybe a little bit strange or eccentric because of that Aquarius thing kind of coming through. I really think that this trine is just so pleasant. I think just with all of the Moon, Venus, Moon, Jupiter aspects in general, we're definitely want to be a little bit what is that word? Cautious of going overboard with engaging and wanting to be in pleasure mode, right? But the world has been burning. So engage in pleasure. I think that this day, for the most part, until we get into the evening, feels kind of nice. We have Mercury sextile Pluto. That's going to be at 3:05 p.m. This I think feels like definitely information, secrets kind of maybe coming up, maybe around the law system, things about the judicial system, that Sagittarius impulse. And also the sextile, the flowing aspect between Mercury and Pluto allows us to kind of get to the meat of the matter, to the bottom of things. Pluto is intensifying and making, kind of bringing a depth and a intensity to things. And so where Mercury and Sag kind of just wants to like coast out into, feelings, and not really feelings, actually. It's more like, I just want to take off an adventure, man. And I just want to engage in these like heady principles. Pluto's kind of like, actually, how do we get deeper into it? How do we get to the meat of the matter, truly? So there can just be an intensity of thought and communication here that we wouldn't necessarily think or expect of for Mercury, and things can come up as a result. We're going to get the Moon sextile Chiron. That's going to be at 6:22 p.m. This is an opportunity to really engage in empathy and healing and, the kind of wound licking that might be a little bit productive. We can get kind of above it all with that moon being in Aquarius, right? There's something like, I can see it now. I can see what I need to do. Maybe I don't need to engage with all of the like ooey gooey hard stuff. Instead, I can take these kind of like tangible, I can make these shifts in my mind or my habits in order to really engage in a better way of healing for myself. So I like it. I think it can be all right. We're going to get a little bit of a too much, try not to go overboard moment with Moon quincunx Jupiter at 7:36 p.m. The quincunx, it just says that there's some sort of emotional or habitual adjustment that we need to do here, maybe around how we're engaging with our communities and the kind of care that we're offering them. To me, it kind of feels like maybe it's time to take my own needs into account here. Like, how do I take my needs into account here and also yours? How do we expand together instead of me just doing this for you? I don't know, in some ways it's like Jupiter's asking the moon to shift, and it's asking its own ruler to shift. It's like, hey, Dad, I need you to shift so that we can be better together. It's kind of that sort of feeling. So Also, just be careful of just not having too over of a reaction in any way, whether it's overly detaching, fuck it, I'm out, or overly emoting in some sort of way that feels out of whack, right? Moon in Aquarius is definitely have emotions. They just tend to either push them down or freeze them out, or make it really about other people instead of themselves. Then at 11:15 p.m., we're going to get that moon square Mars. Now, fixed square, I think this is, pretty upset, pretty angry. When I think about it in the sort of mundane way about like the moon in Aquarius, like this is the people wanting us to unite and come together and take care of each other. And it's like angry about this. It needs to do this. Like it wants to take some sort of action. This is a conflict aspect. This is anger, right? This is that kind of stony cold, resolved anger. That kind of comes up in the evening. I'm curious to see a little bit what's going on. But as a reminder, for all of this today, there's no earth in the chart. We are not grounded inside of reality. And so we need to take some extra time to check in about what's going on before we are taking action. That's just my advice for that. So let's get into October 31st, Friday, Halloween. Happy Halloween, everybody. Friday is Venus's day. We still have Venus in Libra, so she's at home. Really, really loves to be in Libra. It's all about connecting with other people and engaging in aesthetic pleasures and art and, the sort of like music and things like that. And so try to do that today. Try to enjoy something. I think that with, it could be fun for getting dressed up. For Halloween. I think maybe we'll be all a little bit more beautiful. We have Venus nearing a perfect square to Jupiter. That'll happen in a couple of days. So we definitely, this kind of too much over the top kind of thing is already in play because it's within the 3 degrees. So that'll just maybe kick off a really kind of wild desire to indulge, to have fun and to play and to be social and to literally indulge in the things that we're putting inside of our body. This feels like putting on way too much glitter, on your costume, as you go out and you're like, oh, but I want to be a little bit sparklier. I want to be a little bit more magical. That's what it feels like to me. Anyways, so we're going to get the moon entering Pisces. There it is. And little emotional, intuitive, psychic, kind of sad girl, Delulu Pisces, right? Very porous in the way that can just kind of absorb everybody else's stuff and then think it's theirs. When the moon is in Pisces, I think it's a very important question to ask ourselves. Is this all mine? Is everything that I'm feeling all mine? Pisces placements are all about needing to learn some good boundaries, needing to do some good boundary work because they're boundaryless, they have no boundaries. So moon square Uranus, this is a mutable square. This is going to happen at 5:17 a.m. I encourage everybody to really remain emotionally flexible. Again, no earth. So just kind of ride with it. This could just be something really surprising and kind of sets us off a little bit emotionally, a piece of information. Then we're like, oh man. And then we're just kind of, feeling some sort of way. So the emotions can really flip flop at this time. So just, being careful about that, especially because we do have the moon trine the sun. That's going to happen later in the evening, but it is applying. So this is like how we are and how we're feeling are really in that flow. It is definitely still having all of this water in the sky. There's a lot of feeling going on. We're going to get the moon square Mercury at 8:32 a.m. Again, this is remaining flexible with how we think. This is, wanting to take some sort of action around something that's going on, but how we're feeling and how we're thinking are not really in alignment. In fact, they're in active conflict with each other, with the square being the temperature and nature of Mars, right? Wants to fight. And so, again, with this mutability that is happening in the sky and essentially a T-square, really being flexible when the moon is interacting with the square to Uranus and the square to Mercury. This is really about, okay, I need to be really flexible around what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. I just kind of need to maybe sit with it. This T-square pushes energy into the Virgo part of chart, right? The Virgo energy. So it says, okay, that means this dynamic tension is calling me to be more discerning, to be more analytical, to really cut the wheat from the chaff, because there's a lot of stuff kind of flying around here right now. So just know that for yourself. We're going to get the moon sesqui square Venus. This can kind of bring up some issues in relationship, or feeling really uncomfortable in relationship, feeling maybe a little bit criticized or wanting to feel critical, maybe like, you don't love me enough, kind of feeling about it all. So I just encourage you to just, again, be flexible. We're going to get that trine from moon to sun at 8:42 p.m. I think this is kind of the intuitive lock-in. Okay, how I am reflecting and how I am feeling, how I am being and how I am feeling. There's a comfort and an ease that's kind of happening here. There is still this flowing feeling and sensitivity that's also happening here. And there's just so much water in the sky. Just cannot stress enough. There's just so much water. We're going to get the moon sesqui square Jupiter at 10:27 p.m. And this is, a water sesqui square. So this is really too much. This is like the cup overfloweth. This is, the sesqui square is a square and a half. So it's like really wanting to take action, but it's not quite there. And it feels like it's hitting against the wall. And again, there's just too much water. There's too much water. This feels like, getting a cup of water like splashed in your face, or like when you go and step into the ocean and a wave kind of takes you out. So just being careful here to not overreact, because this is very much kind of an overreaction sort of moment. So November 1st, Saturday is Saturn's day. We have Saturn in sad emotional Pisces, wanting to limit the limitless. It's retrograde as well. Saturn days, as I have said in other episodes, it's always good to work on those larger achievements and goals that you're trying to kind of go after, right? It's a good day to just kind of clean up your business, the life business, to do your tasks, to do your chores, to clean your gutters, to mop and sweep your floors, and just kind of like do that reset. The Saturday is for work. If I had it in my way, I would make work days, the traditional work days, be from Tuesday to Saturday, with Sunday and Monday being off. I just think that's how I would do it, but no one asked me to be God, unfortunately. We don't have any Ptolemaic aspects from the moon to anything for the whole day. So I think that kind of brings us into this like kind of free floating kind of space that is kind of rife with ideas and opportunities to kind of communicate. There is an adjusting aspect at 10:46 p.m. from the moon to Venus and Libra. So there's this like quincunx, there's making some sort of emotional adjustment around how we're showing up in partnership and in relationship with other people. It could also bring up the sort of like, I want you to love me. I want to be a part of this, but like I have to shift, or I need something to kind of change here in order to make that happen. This is water and air with the quincunx. And so there is definitely an anxiety here because there is no grounding to it. We can't sink our teeth into it. So making some sort of emotional adjustment to our values, to relationship, to maybe how we're engaging with money. Try not to spend too much money today. And at 11:37 p.m., we're going to get Venus opposite Chiron, which really feels like this sort of wounding inside of relationships and identity. It's like the awareness of maybe how you've wanted to show up or have wanted other people to show up for you in relationship, and it just hasn't been happening. And you're like, oh man, I'm feeling really hurt here. I'm feeling real raw, I'm feeling unacknowledged or not cared for enough, or not, what is that word? Yeah, not acknowledged here. So, this really feels, and it's within that T-square action with Jupiter. Ooh, which brings again that too much kind of thing. This is dynamic tension, the T-square kind of shooting some energy. And I think what it really wants us to do is, because the T-square is with Aries and Libra and Cancer, it shoots this energy into the like end part of Saturn. I mean, not Saturn, Capricorn, around the Saturn bound. And so what I think this is saying is like, I'm feeling really hurt, I'm feeling acknowledged, but like also I need to create better boundaries here. Like it's up to me to establish this, to establish the structures and the space inside of relationship for this to work better. It's not up to you, it's up to me to set that standard here. So that's kind of how it reads and feels to me. And that's the end of the day. It's on Saturday. So, I think if you're out partying, having, doing all that stuff, I wouldn't necessarily love to be out when that aspect really hits. Me and my partner will be out during this time. So I will just keep that in mind for myself as we're out, like with people and everything. Like if I start seeing people looking a little sad, a little bit wounded, I will remember why. Okay, so let us traverse our cute little butts into Sunday, November 2nd. This is the sun's day. Sun is in Scorpio. This is definitely, we're in fall. It's when the leaves get real crisp, and the air is real cold in the morning and you need a blanket, you need slippers. Like I'm really loving it. And the sun's day is for a day of, I believe, for rest and relaxation and play and just kind of in the state of being, however that shows up for you. We still have that sun in Scorpio being ruled by that Mars in Scorpio. Mars is very soon going to shift in a few days, but he is ending his sojourn inside of Scorpio, and he's in the bound of Saturn. So he's really like, all right, let's like nip this in the bud. Let's cut this off. Let's take this action and cut it. It feels very like slice and dice about it all. It's like this ending sort of thing to it all. With Mars being at 28 degrees, you'll see him right here. He's exiting this realm of being within the 3 degrees to Jupiter and the 3 degrees to Saturn. And so we're kind of breaking this water again, cutting, like we've been feeling a lot. It's time to cut it. You need to cut it kind of thing going on here. So Moon trine Jupiter, that's going to be 12:17 a.m., middle of the night. Overwhelming feeling. This is before the moon changes signs. Just be aware of this. This is for noon, so you're going to see that the moon is going to go into Aries. But before that, the moon is going to be over here and is going to trine Jupiter, and it's just overwhelming feelings. And, considering that we had that opposition between Venus and Chiron, which is still very strong, this just feels like I'm feeling a lot about what I'm realizing inside of how I'm showing up in relationships, or being in relationship with other people, or being social. Kind of feels like, yeah, like you're out partying and like your friend hurts your feelings pretty bad. Anyways, yeah, emotional, sensitive, psychic, some intuition here, but there's a lot of feeling. Be careful that it's actually your feelings and not just what you've been absorbing of other people. We're going to get the moon conjunct Saturn at 1:30 a.m. And this is just really like, that's a reality check. That is a wah-wah, the Debbie Downer. That is the solemn, more serious, maybe feeling a little bit isolated, and that makes sense with the aspects that happened just before it. We get really real in this moment. But definitely moon conjunct Saturn feels like, I poured over with emotions, and now I gotta kind of like I gotta put a boundary on that. I gotta lock that up. Moon trine Mars at 6:16 a.m. This is a good working aspect to be getting some stuff done. And right around that time, we're going to get the moon conjunct Neptune, which makes us really intuitive, can be, a little bit delusional. And it's going to wake up the trine that is going to happen tomorrow between Mars and Neptune. So there's some sort of like spiritual warrior kind of thing going on. I rock for Jesus. Like I am going to take this action because of my beliefs, whether they're true or not up to us to say. But like there's a spiritualness, a very otherworldly depth to the sorts of maybe actions we're taking and how we're feeling about engaging with that. At 8:39 a.m., we're going to get the moon entering Aries. Spicy Aries. Feel it quick, let it go quick, right? This is the moon in Aries. As I am engaged to a person with the moon in Aries, they're just so instinctually tuned in. That feels right, that feels wrong, right? Like they are the gut check. They just feel it and then let it go. They feel first before they can figure out what was really upsetting them, right? There's a reaction before the processing that can happen here. There can be an impulsiveness here, certainly. After all, it is, ruled by Mars. It wants to do, go, cut, burn kind of moment here. And we do have, Mars is in Scorpio. It's very strong there. We have the moon sextile Uranus. That's going to be at 9 a.m. You can engage in some, taking on some new action, moving a little bit differently. And certainly there could be some opportunity here to feel a little differently than you have before, do something a little bit surprising. And it can kind of bring like a heady intuition into it all. We get the moon sextile Pluto, and that's going to be at 11:05 a.m. And this really kind of feels to me like, let's get fired up. I say, let's get fired up. Pluto is really adding that intensity of feeling and passion. Even though Pluto's in Aquarius, it's still Pluto. It's still intense. It still has depth to it all. And this could be like, I'm going to take this action in order to engage in community, in order to do that power to the people thing. I'm the power. Those are the people. Let's work together kind of moment here. with the Aries and Aquarius archetypes. It's like, I am one of one, and then I am one of many. Let's do this. Handshake, sextile, you know? So there could be some surprising kind of juice kind of running through the sky with that sextile to Uranus and then the sextile to Pluto. And it also kind of allows us to get into emotionally get deeper and more intense and to react in maybe a little bit more intensive ways, especially with the moon being in Aries. The reactions could feel pretty spicy. We're going to get the sun sesqui square Saturn. You know, this is at 2:22 p.m. These are in water signs. I think that there's just like a frustration around like really what we're trying to get done, what we're trying to accomplish here. And we could feel like we've kind of hit a bit of a brick wall or some sort of stop, or there's a harshness to it all. But it's like how we're feeling about it with the water signs being activated here. And then we're going to get the moon trine Mercury, 3:17 p.m. This is really a good time to engage in conversation. I think there's kind of a playfulness to the moon trine Mercury, the moon in Aries trine Mercury and Sag. It kind of feels like, I mean, I said it, but I'm joking. There could also be like with Sag, there's really like, I'm speaking my truth and my truth matters. And with the moon and Aries, it's like, I'm number one, I matter the most. So I think we need to also be very careful that the ideas that we're sharing at this time aren't so selfish and self-serving that we're alienating other people. You know, communicate your truth, certainly, but make room for the ability for other people's truths to also be expressed at this time, because they're sitting under that same aspect, that same energy in the sky. Venus square Jupiter, 4:16 p.m. This is, you know, again, that idea of too much. This is a planet in domicile with a planet in exaltation. Like, this is the king in its castle and an esteemed guest in another castle, and they are having a party. This is indulgence. Be careful about how you spend your money today. And the things that you put in your body, how you are engaging with pleasure. Like, engage with pleasure, certainly, but let's make sure that we're not breaking the bank. And then we're going to get a cute biquintile from the moon to the sun. That's, you know, in the afternoon, and it's going to be the last aspect of the day, you know, just kind of this flowing energy kind of running in the background. You know, really try not to let that frustration of the sun sesqui square Saturn of maybe feeling like we're not able to achieve our goals today get in the way of these other aspects, you know, starting in the morning, moving through the day, to kind of allow us to feel in flow and be able to get things done. So long as you can kind of feel what you feel, but not subscribe too deeply or too heavily to them, I think that you can possibly turn the day around. Engage with play and pleasure in the afternoon. Let's move forward to Monday, November 3rd. Okay, this day's a little bit more, this could be a little bit more of a challenging day. And of course it's Monday, right? Monday is the moon's day. The moon is in spicy Aries. We need to know that by the end of the day, the moon is going to meet Chiron, which can feel like we're activating some sort of soul wound around our identity. And we're very aware of it. We're maybe feeling really spicy about it and having some hard times with it. So just know that this lead up, this fired upness around how we're feeling maybe disrespected or forgotten, or, you know, anything having to do with identity wounds that we all carry, is going to have some activation today. Moon quincunx the sun to 11 a.m., you know, free-floating anxiety, you know, just an anxiousness kind of floating in the air. It's the middle of the night, so let's try not to stress out about it. 3:56 a.m., we have the Venus in Libra, quincunx Saturn in Pisces retrograde. adjustments around finances. Did you spend too much the day before when we had that cute little square? Did you indulge too much over this week? Did you do a little bit too much? And now we gotta go, gotta tighten up the purse strings. So there could be, setting new goals financially, making some sort of adjustment inside of relationships that we need to do, based on new boundaries and information coming to light. This can also feel really unsettled inside of, our relationships. I think it's interesting that there's something here. I think there is this ability to make the adjustment and almost to happily make the adjustment. And the reason why I say this, and if there's any other astrologers that ever listen to this, so Venus and Saturn are in each other's exaltation signs. So it's like, yeah, of course, let's work together. Like I feel good over there and you feel good here. Like, yes, we can make this adjustment willingly. So let's hope that that is the case. We're going to get a cranky aspect at 7:13 a.m. That's the moon sesqui square Mars. Just be very, very careful of anger popping off in ways. This is very Martian. The moon in Aries is ruled by that Mars in Scorpio, and Mars in Scorpio is at home. So it could really feel critical. It could feel like, a crisis that's kind of coming up and popping off. So just cautious there. We're going to get the moon sesqui square Mercury, 3:56 p.m. I think we need to be very careful about how we are choosing to express ourselves in this moment, because I think we could say things that we don't really mean. I think that there's a discomfort here that is maybe being expressed in ways that could be a little bit unhealthy. We're going to get that Mars trine Neptune at 7:59 p.m. This is that spiritual warrior stuff, right? This is that, like, I have a higher calling and purpose and I'm going to take that sort of action. I am, moving in a way that, like, is trying to connect me to the universe. There can also be a sort of, like, illusion or delusion around the actions that we're taking at this time. We still have Neptune at an anaretic degree. We have Mars at an anaretic degree. This is happening at 29 degrees, 43 minutes. So, it's at the very end. There's something critical and crucial and very important here around the ways that we're taking action and ways that we're moving forward. It'd be very interesting to see kind of what comes up, especially when it comes to things that having to do with water. Yeah. It's kind of it's an interesting little space. We also have to remember that, like, that Jupiter-Saturn trine is still within that 1 degree, like, still so much water. So much water in the sky at this time. And then we have the moon conjunct Chiron. 10:50 p.m. Sensitive. Very, 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 very sensitive around the meanness, the I-ness, the ways that we have gone off and to be our own warrior, maybe receiving some sort of pain as a result of that. There's something here that says, I can engage with this wounding right now and maybe take some sort of action to do that work. I do think that there's a very wide fire trine that, a sign-based trine with Mercury, just kind of allowing us to speak our truth, but really just be cautious about how we're engaging with hurt. It's important to make sure that we're not engaging too much with our hurt, but we're doing it in ways that are good. So work on your healing. This takes us into November 4th, Tuesday. Tuesday is Mars's day. And we get a big old ingress of Mars into Sagittarius at 5:01 a.m. So Mars leaves the sign that he is very comfortable in and now is in a fire sign and in a sign that says adventure, travel, freedom, this feels like freedom fighter, you know? There is something very passionate about this. We still have Mercury and Mars are just like trucking along together. Something that I have forgotten to say in previous days is that we are getting closer and closer to Mercury going retrograde. And so we're in this space of time where the things, the conflict, the verbal conflict and confrontation and the ideas have, the ability to be revisited in a few weeks' time. At 12:25 a.m., we're going to get the moon square Jupiter. This is an over the top sort of energy. The nice thing is that, he's ending his time in Aries, though at noon, you'll see that the moon has already turned to Taurus. But there's an over the topness. There is a wanting to take some sort of action, and in the ways that we're feeling and we're believing, and it can feel super emotional. We're getting moon opposite Venus at 3:29 a.m. It'll be around here. Moon Venus out of sorts, some sort of awareness around, maybe the work you need to do inside of a relationship. This is this can again with the cardinality of the opposition, wanting to take some sort of more establishing action as it pertains to like how we're showing up in relationship, maybe. Let's see. Yeah, Mars is going to go into Sag. And again, Mars in Sagittarius also feels like spiritual warrior stuff. So it's like maybe that like inspiration or intuition we had about how we wanted to go forward with that Mars trine Neptune, right? Is now like we really have like the energy and the push with the Mars in Sag to like go forward and conquer in some sort of way. We are going to get the moon is going to enter Taurus at 8:15 a.m. It goes into the sign of his exaltation. It is all about, yummy soup and comfort blankets and eating chocolate and really just trying to get to some sort of emotional security and stability that, maybe wasn't really offered to us when the moon was in Aries, just kind of, just kind of being passionate and hyphy and spicy. Now there's less spice. Not that Tauruses aren't spicy, but, we are a little bit more security minded, and stability minded. We just need to chill out, man. Moon and Taurus is telling us, yeah, it's time for us to just kind of chill out. However, we are going to get a quincunx from the moon to Mars at 8:25 a.m. So we need to make some sort of adjustment around how we're taking action. Maybe around like our goals, our spiritual goals, or, the ways that, and maybe even the ways that we are expressing ourselves in passionate ways with anger, or making some sort of adjustment around like our desires, right? With Mars being also a planet that talks about a desire. This can be something that can say angry, cranky, anxious, angry, kind of that thing with the moon Mars quincunx. Definitely an out of sorts sort of feeling. We're going to get Mars opposite Uranus at 9:30 a.m. I feel like this could feel pretty kind of explosive, and surprising and shocking. And, it almost feels like stuff that has to do with like electricity and fire. And, Mars is very close to Pluto at this time too. See here, Mars opposite Uranus, very close within a degree to Pluto. And Mars-Pluto aspects can be very intense and can have a violent sort of thing. And with Uranus being here too, there's a surprise factor here. There's a shock factor here. There's electricity factor here. There is a sudden sort of thing happening here. And, there's, yeah, I can only imagine. There's some interesting energy in the sky, certainly, you know, and the moon is going to have that trigger. So when it does come and interact with Mars, there's going to kind of bring up this anxious energy. And, you know, with Uranus being here, that's surprising, which also can create anxiety. We have the moon Pluto square, which is going to happen at 10:36 a.m. I really think that this energy kind of holds the sky hostage for the whole day. Is this intensity, this surprisedness, this like, I need to take action, I need to go, I need to do something with that Mars and the Mars and Sag. I think that today it is going to offer us some surprises. I don't know what they're going to be. I'm not psychic. I'm only looking at what the chart shows. I think that there's some surprises in store for us on Tuesday, November 4th. And with that Mars opposite Uranus, I think just be really, really careful about how we use our energy, how we use our bodies, how we take action, because like literally it's like, it almost just seems like a plane dropping out of the sky, or, you know, a ladder suddenly breaking and someone falls, or it just, there's a suddenness to it and a quickness to it. You know, it's, you know, Mars is in the sign of the traveler, that Sag energy, and Uranus is also in the sign that talks about short distance travel. So there could be something around travel at this time, just in general, planes and trains and automobiles, strange travel, you know, it could have to do with, interstellar travel. There's something there. So moon square Pluto, you know, this is a crisis point. This feels intense. This feels really critical. You know, we're feeling really intensely and really deeply, and we're being pushed by Pluto in this Martian square aspect to drop something, to give up something. And I think it's something about how we designate security in our lives in order for us to take better care of each other, the Pluto and Aquarius initiative. So, you know, if you're being pushed to give up something, if you're feeling intensely about something, like maybe sink into it a little bit and figure out what that is. And then we have the moon quincunx Mercury at 4:47 p.m. last aspect of the day. Again, being really, I think, you know, let's be cautious around how we're communicating at this time. And again, there is like misalignment and an adjustment that needs to be made around how we're feeling versus what we're thinking and how we're expressing ourselves. So just being cautious around how we're expressing ourselves, because it might not be entirely authentic, and we might have to go over that again, revisit it again, because we are in the shadow period of Mercury. All right, so that's the end of the week. Thanks for hanging out. If you made it through this whole video, I appreciate you. And yeah, take care of yourselves.